Hello everyone, I hope you had a great day. Today we are looking at some new malicious compliance stories. I hope you enjoy them. If you like the video, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel to grow. And if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe for more content. And now, let's start with the first story, shall we? The first story is called He Should Not Have Complained. I work in a factory on the east coast of the US. My job is to supervise the machine that wraps products to be packed and shipped out and away from the factory. Above my position are the line supervisors who keep track of paperwork trails for stuff being taken to and from the product lines. This story is centered on one of these people, who we'll call Mary, as well as a certain member of the mechanical department who I shall name Pedro. Pedro would do his job by doing rounds and looking for broken machines marked by operators with a helpful big red sign reading "broken down." He would troubleshoot them and then put the sign away and start the machine back up. No one at the time had any issues with his work, and he never spoke much to my other coworkers at all. The machines win as well as possible, and he gets to relax in a nice furnished mechanics room. Win-win. Mary perhaps wasn't the most popular supervisor, but she always got her work done at the end of the day on time. She had been with the company for a long time, think 20 plus years, with little to no issues by upper management. However, this changed when Mary was called into a meeting with the plant management. Our big boss explained that Pedro has complained quite often that her operators have been lazy. They were delegating problems to him when they could fix the problems themselves. In Pedro's defense, he could have been 100% correct in his accusations. What he should have done though was to go to Mary instead of the plant bosses. She had every power to fix that issue and as a bonus yell at someone. Now, by going over Mary's head, Pedro had made her look bad when her record was otherwise clean. With the management fed up with his constant complaining, they made some rule changes in an attempt to shut him up. The assembled meeting tells Mary that her operators are no longer allowed to use the red signs on the machine. Mary quickly realizes this would create a problem in which Pedro would no longer know what exactly is broken. When she asks what can be done to offset this, they tell her something that they would come to regret. Just make sure to stay on top of the problem by using the page system whenever you need a mechanic. Now, these people call it a page system, but in reality it was an enormous overhead speaker system that the factory would use to communicate with other lines. The volume was rather impressive. It had to be in order for people to hear over the wrappers. These speakers ran to every room in the factory, including the plant manager's office as well as the mechanical workshop. Mary gathers her crew around, tells them the news and asks for any problem to be brought to her. She then set to work using the loudspeakers to announce whenever she could every single issue possible to page Pedro. "Pedro, please come to line X." This was now heard 5 to 6 times an hour, when before it maybe happened once or twice every 3 hours. This was how most people came to learn about the whole debacle. No one could escape the speaker system going off at a ridiculous rate. Wrapping going off the eye? Call Pedro. A roller is loose? Get Pedro over here. Belt stuck tight? Looks like a job for Pedro. After about a week and some odd days, Mary is approached by the same supervisors as before. With no rules technically broken, she does not get punished. They asked her to tone down on the pages. Pedro approaches Mary in private and asks her to ignore the new rule about the red signs. Remember when Mary pointed out that the non-use of the signs would be a big problem? Now, this forced the mechanics to track down individual operators and ask what was wrong with the machines. This easily almost doubled the time Pedro used to spend on the lines. Whether Mary would listen to him would depend on her mood. The next story is called No Headphones. I worked on a support desk, servicing a relatively small number of customers. I generally spent most of the day on the phone, but every now and then there would be a quiet period. During those, I could swap my headset for some headphones and just chill out to music while I continued to work on other things. For whatever reason, my manager decided to rob me of this simple pleasure. She straight up banned the use of headphones in the section. Her claim was that it was making me unapproachable. Realistically though, besides her, there was rarely anyone approaching my desk. And even if there had been, I would have had the headphones off before they were within 20 feet. Not content to go down without a fight, I knocked up a cable that went from the headphone jack in my PC to an old phone handset headset switchbox. This allowed me to switch my phone headset between the desk phone and the PC. It was music at the flick of a switch, and no one was any the wiser. The real cherry on top was when the manager would come into the section. I would just sit there staring at my screen, not acknowledging her presence. She would have just seen me with the headset on, assumed that I was on a call, and she wouldn't interrupt me. I complied with her no headphone request, still got to listen to music, and effectively made myself unapproachable in the process. The last story is called Getting Rid of a Bad Teacher. This took place roughly 19 years ago, when I was in middle school. I had and still have a disability that prevents me from writing legibly. However, my parents quickly learned I had an insane typing speed. As a result, my ADHD psychologist and parents got me a word processor for my 5th grade Christmas present. It would be an understatement to say this was a life changer. My assignments became so much easier, as I knew the stuff but couldn't write it down. My attitude about school changed, and I became the hip popular kid at school for having this fancy new piece of cutting-edge technology. None of my teachers between the 5th and 7th grade had an issue with this. They were quite impressed by the technology. Mind you, word processors weren't exactly new, but seeing them in schools was unheard of at this point, as they were quite expensive. This changed in the 8th grade with Mrs. Grump. Mrs. Grump was your traditional old woman who looked like my great-great-grandmother. Grey hair, wrinkles upon wrinkles, a bead necklace that reached past her breast, flower print outfits, and clip-on earrings. Seriously, she was one bobbed hairdo away from being Karen's grandmother. The first day I took my word processor, she was on my back. Anytime she saw me with it, she would threaten to take it from me and reduce my marks for the class. I recall myself standing up for myself the first time. But I was never one to argue with my teachers. I never needed to, because my teachers up until then were completely understanding. When she said no, I backed off. At that point, school became miserable for me. When I typed up my assignments, Mrs. Grump lowered my marks for not being handwritten. Anytime I asked her if I could stay after class to finish my assignments or finish writing down my notes, she would lower my marks on the next assignment for wasting her time. Anytime I asked a friend for help while in class, you guessed it, she would lower my marks. Luckily, as most of my fellow students understood my problems, a group of them approached me and offered to help me. They started offering me their notes each evening so I could bring them home and photocopy so I could keep up with everything. We also hung out in the library at lunches, and they actually helped me with my handwriting, so it could be at the very least legible. This allowed me to write out my homework, despite it taking super long. I genuinely don't know what her problem was, but she began reducing my marks because of poor handwriting and inspecting my binders to make sure I wasn't stealing other people's work. If she found a photocopied note, she would lower my marks. This was absolutely ridiculous, as none of my classmates were marked in such a way. Now, as I explained, I am not one to question authority. Despite being miserable with Mrs. Crump's attitude, I quietly accepted I would probably fail. Unfortunately, I don't remember why my parents didn't help. But I think it might have been due to my older brother being part of Mrs. Crump's in the past, and they thought I was being overdramatic. HDHD, remember? With the background out of the way, onto the compliance. I don't know what happened on this particular day, but I had a sudden surge of confidence. It was a particularly bad day. I remember we were doing an assignment involving microscopes in class. We needed to describe what we saw, and instinctively I brought out my word processor. I put it on the table and looked down into the microscope. But when I came back up, Mrs. Grump was standing at my desk with my word processor in her hand. I am confiscating this and throwing it away. But I need it, and it's expensive. Too bad. I have warned you many times not to bring it out in my class. You didn't listen, and so these are the consequences. At this point, she put it in her cabinet unit and shut the door. Everyone in the class was silent, and Mrs. Grump sat back down. Some of my classmates tried to calm me down. I was crying, and Mrs. Grump didn't care. In particular, I recall, of all people, one of the students who usually bullied me trying to cheer me up. We'll call him Jim from now on, as Jim now works as a coach at our gym now. I didn't work on the assignment, and when Mrs. Grump came to take my blank sheet, she scoffed. If you don't like the way I teach, why don't you complain to someone about it? I left the classroom, defeated, but to my surprise, during lunch, Jim came up to me with my word processor in hand. He stole it out of the teacher's cabinet while she was returning the microscopes to the lab. He told me he was going to keep it in his locker till after school, when he'll return it. That way, I wouldn't get in even more trouble when she finds it missing. It was at that moment when I snapped. I don't know what it was. Maybe the fact that the person who had bullied me for so long was the one helping me. But I wanted Mrs. Grump gone. But what was I going to do? Well, complain to someone, of course. She is a teacher, and it's not like me to disobey the teacher. Now, in any other situation, I honestly don't think this would have worked. But I got extremely lucky in regards to the events that followed this decision. So, myself and Jim went to the school's principal during lunch. Me and the principal, up until this point, had never officially met, as she had just started at the school this year after the previous principal retired. We are going to call the principal Mrs. Awesome. Mrs. Awesome was eating at her desk and was surprised to be interrupted, though she did sigh when she saw Jim. I know for a fact those two were well acquainted. I think she thought the two of us had gotten into a fight, so she asked me to sit down and for Jim to wait outside. I started explaining to her what happened in class, and after she realized Jim wasn't to blame, she called him back in to support my story. When I mentioned the word processor, however, her eyes lit up. Despite never formally talking before, it was clear she knew who I was. The discussion shifted to the word processor itself, and she asked me to go over the functions and everything. I showed her how I could type on it, transfer the files to a computer to either print off or email, the typing tutorials loaded on it. I explained why I needed it, showing her my handwriting and how I had relied on it since the 5th grade. She and Jim seemed quite interested in it, taking notes and everything. At the end of the impromptu tutorial that lasted, Mrs. Awesome thanked me and had us step out for a moment. After she brought me back in, she explained to me that there was nothing she could do at this point in time. She gave me an out-of-school suspension for a week, but explained I was not in trouble at all, and it wasn't being marked against me. The explanation I believe she gave was for stealing out of the teacher's cabinet, though I wasn't required to return the word processor. This also got Jim out of trouble as well, which he was thankful for. Mrs. Awesome said that everything will be taken care of next week when I return, and she will contact my parents explaining the situation. The week I was off, Jim was coming by and dropping off his homework, so I photocopy it and not fall behind. Quite frankly, at first I thought he just wanted me to do his work for him, as it was a complete 180 on how he used to treat me. But we became good friends after this happened. Even asking him today, Jim doesn't recall why he started treating me better after Mrs. Grump took my word processor. During those days, my parents were on the phone constantly. I wasn't aware of what was going on, but they bought me a new game and bought takeout a lot. Genuinely, I felt pampered. My parents came in with me when I returned. But rather than to the classroom, I was brought to the school's boardroom instead, where a bunch of people in suits were. My family doctor and ADHD psychologist was also in attendance, which honestly shocked me. Mrs. Awesome explained to me that these were representatives from the school board and that they were extremely interested in my word processor. In hindsight, it was a bit of a jerk move for no one to inform me that I was being brought in front of the school board to present my word processor. But I began explaining it, as I did to Mrs. Awesome, showing the different functions and such. After I finished, my family doctor and psychologist gave a better explanation than what I gave as to why I needed it and how it helped. It ended with my parents explaining how it has changed my education and how I enjoyed school. Honestly, I don't recall the immediate response. But a day later, Mrs. Awesome did explain everything to me. Apparently, she was actually a sitting member of the school board, who had been standing in as the principal that year until they found a replacement. When I showed her the word processor, she saw the potential they had to help students such as her own daughter, who had similar circumstances as me. She contacted the school board about potentially investing in some word processors for each school in the district for the next year. But they wanted to see it first. Again, this was a rather new concept, all things considered. That's why she needed me that day. That's also why she allowed me to stay home for the week, as there was no rule in place to protect the word processor from being confiscated and possibly destroyed. I still question why I was never informed until the actual meeting, but whatever. Anyways, due to the presentation, I was given permission to continue my work on my word processor, much to Mrs. Grump's dismay. She was also required to adjust all my previous marks to remove her deductions. Meanwhile, the school board decided on ordering 5 to 8 word processors for each school in the district for the next year. Our school was getting 8, as it was a larger school. Students in what was called resource class had the option to sign off the word processors for a day to help work on their in-school assignments. There was an altogether increase of the resource students' marks as a result of this change, I've been told. And the school board began looking into other ways to help students. But what about Mrs. Grump? Other than having to readjust my marks and allowing me to use my word processor, she got off scot-free. It's great and all that I made a huge difference in my school district. But how did Mrs. Grump get her just desserts for making 8th grade a living hell for me? Well, I don't know if this was mere coincidence, outside interference, or a parting gift from Mrs. Awesome after she returned to her position on the school board. But all resource students coming into the 8th grade had been assigned to Mrs. Grump's class the next year. And as a result, they were signing out the word processors constantly in her class. I learned this because my 9th grade class was right across the hall from her classroom. Windows in the classrooms allowed me to look across into her class to see 4 to 6 students typing up a storm on their word processors. This came to a head, however, when Mrs. Grump took one of the word processors and threw it out of the window. After that, Mrs. Grump was asked to retire halfway through the school year. She was replaced with a sweet teacher that held ice cream parties for the students that completed all their homework assignments each month. And that, everyone, is probably the proudest moment of my life. Not only did my actions result in students with disabilities getting more resources to help them, but I also watched the worst teacher I ever had the pleasure of meeting get escorted out of the school by security. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.